Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jean Fourie, and today we're going to talk about auditory perception and the importance of having very accurate and acute perception for reading. So auditory perception is one of the foundational skills that is required in order to be a proficient reader. There are two key senses that need to be functional, and that's vision and ears, in order for learners to read accurately and well. So we're going to look at what auditory perception is and what it entails, a little bit of the neurology behind it, and some difficulties that learners can have with this perception, and how we can support them in the classroom and with various apparatus and integration of the various different senses. So we know that in order to read, you need to have a variety of different skills in place. Here are just some of them. You need to have phonological awareness, which we're going to talk about more, an understanding of the phonics, which is the relationship of the sounds and the letters on the page. You need to have fluency, so a bit of automaticity in the reading process, understanding the vocabulary of the texts that are in place, and then comprehending the meaning behind what the text is all about. So we'll start with phonemic awareness, and this is the ability to manipulate and to understand the particular phonemes or individual sounds in the spoken language. So every language has a unique set of phonemes, which are the sounds of the language, and we learn these sounds. In fact, we start learning them while we are in the womb. Your ears are one of the first senses that are wired up to the brain. And so in the womb, babies can already start to hear mommy's voice, and they are picking up sounds in the environment. So as soon as babies are born, they are able to hear, and the sense of the language and the environment around them is understood. Eyes only wire up after birth properly, and so it takes a little while, couple of weeks, for babies to get their eyes connected adequately. So auditory sounds are wired up very early in life.
I'm doing that now. Okay.
So we have to understand the sounds of the language, and this makes it one of the earliest reading skills. Phonemic awareness is that ability to manipulate the sounds. So we know we can hear the first sounds in a word. We can hear the different sounds that the language makes. In English, there are 44 different sounds that this language has, and every language has its own unique set of sounds. So if you think about some of the indigenous languages, for instance, the Xhosa language, the Xhosa clicks, they have a variety of different clicks. So there are 3 different clicking sounds in that language, and those are all the phonemes. So this is a crucial skill that one needs to have in order to read in a particular language that you are reading. Then phonics is the knowledge of the graphemes. The graphemes are the printed letters on the page. So the graphemes have particular sounds that they represent, And so you need to understand that convention. And every written language has its own convention of letters or graphemes and sounds. So understanding that correspondence is what gets taught in school. So phonemic awareness develops right from birth. Before the child even gets to school, they are able to speak their primary language. And they have thus built up the phonemic awareness of that language. They know the sounds and they can speak the language. So it's the spoken words. But in order to read what is written on the page, one then needs to know the phonics, and that is what the particular sounds, what the letters represent sounds. So some languages have perfect one-to-one letter sound correspondence, where the letter that you see on the page, there's only one sound for that letter. In English, we do not have perfect one-to-one correspondence, and so it makes it very difficult to learn the sounds that the words that the letters on the page make. So if you think about the letter F, for as in the word fish, that is a f sound. If you think about the letters P and H, as in the word elephant, that also makes a f sound, elephant. And so there are multiple ways of representing the sounds in English. We then also have the complication of one sound, one grapheme having multiple sounds. So if you think of the letter A written on the page, A for a thing, but if you put it into words, it can be an A as in apple, or it can be an as in about. So the sounds vary, and we also need to have a knowledge of that variation. So there are only 26 letters in the alphabet, but we have 44 different sounds, and so there are combinations of sounds, combinations of letters that make up different sounds. For instance, if you have an S and an H, that makes the sound sh. There's no particular grapheme for the sound sh, so it has those two graphemes for that. So the correspondence and the learning of the phonics needs to be formally taught, and this is what learners go to school for. And it develops continually as one learns about the conventional ways of writing words, and we need to be taught these things overtly. In order for all this reading to work accurately, we need our auditory perception to be working. So this is the process of identifying, organizing, and interpreting the sensory information that our ears are hearing. So auditory perception is different from hearing. Hearing has got to do with having our ears working adequately, but we can hear things, but how we interpret them and how we make meaning of the sounds that we hear is got to do with auditory perception. So it's taking what the ears are hearing and making meaning of those sounds. So if you are in a foreign country and you are hearing a foreign language which you've never heard before, you will be hearing people speak that language, but you will be unable to make meaning of it until you have adequately learned to make meaning of the particular sounds and putting those sounds together to make words that have a meaningful understanding of it. Now, when we deal with learners who have any kinds of learning problems, there is often an underlying difficulty with their auditory perception. And so there's any difficulties related to delays in language development, any difficulties that children have had with not hearing during those crucial first 3 years when language is developing. Those that will have difficulty. We know of lots of children when they have nose infections and sinusitis, and it leads to damage or infections in the eustachian tube and the middle ear. That can cause difficulty with the child perceiving and hearing. And if there's any time that is significant, like about 3 months in a child's crucial time of developing language in the first, let's say, 0 to 3 to 4 years old, but really that influences the language that they develop. So we want to ensure that children have their ears functional. And even so, once we can establish that hearing is adequate, there often are difficulties between the hearing and what happens in the cortical areas of the brain where the sounds are remembered and where they're manipulated and where they are turned into meaning. So these things can have a ripple effect. If there's difficulty with auditory perception, there's often difficulty with language, and then there's difficulty with reading. So we need to have a very clear understanding that the child's auditory functioning and their auditory perception is working for the reading skills to develop adequately. So there are various areas in the brain that are involved, and it's got to do with the cortex, which is the outer covering of the brain, and the visual perception, the cortical visual perception, which sits at the back of the brain, needs to be functional for visual perception to be working. The auditory perception is happening on both sides of the brain, and it's got to do with Wernicke's area and Broca's area mostly. These are the areas that are taking the sounds that are received and turning them into meaningful, something that the brain can make meaning of. Okay, so often there are difficulties with all those areas. There are a variety of different skills, subsets of auditory perception that we need to be aware of as learning support or remedial teachers. And the first one, which is really crucial, is this idea of being able to discriminate the different sounds. So you will hear people speak about auditory discrimination, and this is the ability to detect the similarities and the differences between auditory sounds. So how are words the same? Which parts of the word are the same? How are the words slightly different? And so if people do not have clear ability to hear the different sounds in a language, this can affect their pronunciation of the words and their articulation, but it can also then have a ripple effect in how people read. So often incorrect pronunciation is heard, or there is an inability to hear that similar sounds are slightly different. So if we look at some of the sounds like a f and a th, they sound pretty much the same. A th is one of those aspirant sounds made on the breath, and a th, you get a th and a th. So there's a f and a th, the th sound, which is not voiced, and they often can be confused. So all those soft sounds often are the ones that learners are having difficulty with. A p and a b, one is voiced, one is not voiced. And so if the child has any difficulty with picking up the language, they're going to have difficulty with hearing those aspirant sounds. So there's misinterpretation of auditory stimulus, and then there can be confusion as to what the word is, and this can affect comprehension. So if you think back to one of the tests that you would be doing as a scholastic diagnostic assessment, you would be doing a test called the Wepman, and that is a quick screening test to have a look if the child is hearing and being able to discriminate between different sounds. So that is a crucial underlying skill that you need to have some way of doing a diagnostic assessment to determine if that is a difficulty that the child has. And there are a variety of different ways that we can help the child with all of this. I'm not going to go through all of them. We can have recorded sounds. We can use different kinds of games that we play with that we look at sounds, sound walks, drawings indicating what the child has heard, verbalizing things, lots of rhythmic work with rhymes and clapping and categorizing of sounds and hearing sounds that are different and similar sounds, playing games such as I Spy with an auditory sound, with auditory sounds. And there are a variety of different computer games as well that you can use, particularly if you have a child who needs to have lots of stimulation in this respect. And the key is to do a variety of different things and to do them a little bit every day. So this is not a skill that is just developed once off. It is a long-term thing that needs to be constantly worked on. And then obviously if children have very severe difficulties with this, then you would send them to a speech therapist. Okay, and then obviously reading to children is a really, really good way for them to learn about the sounds as well. Okay, so here is, I'm going to just give you a quick little exercise that you can do. Make yourselves a set of a variety of different picture cards, and I'm going to give you an example, but you could have a different whole collection of these, and you can do these in a variety of different languages. As long as you are finding something where there is similar words, and the sounds, you're trying to work on auditory sounds that are very similar, but that you need to discriminate between those two different sounds. So for instance, here you show the child the picture of this picture of a pan, a frying pan, and then you say the words, and you tell the child that they must clap their hands or put up their hand when you get to the word that is the one in the picture. So you're trying to get them to distinguish between, for instance, ban, pun, Pam, bun, pan. So when you say the word that is correct, that is the one that they have to tell you. So make a whole set of these, and then it's an activity that you can do in your remedial sessions with learners. So I want to give you one more example. This is another little picture, and you say the words cup, cop, cab, cap. So when they have to put their hand up, or cub. And so they are hearing very similar words, and that is an activity where they have to then learn how to discriminate those different words. So that's a really nice activity for you to make as one of your activities in remediation. Another crucial aspect of auditory perception is auditory closure. And this is the ability to kind of figure out what the whole word is, if you've only heard part of the word. So it's the ability to fill in the gaps when you haven't heard everything. And we are doing this all the time when we are listening to anybody speaking. We do it particularly when we are listening to people who are speaking in slightly different dialects. If you're listening to somebody speak American, if you're listening to a TV show or something, and there's somebody speaking in a very strong English accent or some other kind of accent, you would be filling in, and you didn't hear exactly all the words, and there are lots of people that also pronounce words inadequately without all the sounds. Your cortex is quite capable of closing the meaning, so you will be able to close the words there. You'll be able to do that. And children who have learning problems often have difficulties with auditory closure, with filling in the gaps. So they have difficulty with finishing the sounds, and we can give them exercises in that as well. So lots of these exercises, you say the part of a word and ask learners to complete it. And there are some examples I think I've given in the worksheets. Also use compound words, and you can for instance, have a little picture of like a little cupcake, and you can give the first part of the word, this is a cup, and the child must give you the next part, cake, cupcake. You can also have simple words, and you can do like suffixes and prefixes, and you can say here is a child who's walking. What is it if they walked in the past tense? So it's walk, and if the child is walking, you need them to add those suffixes to the closure of the words. And then you can also do it with actual words themselves. And all of this is relying on the underlying foundational skill of auditory memory. So we are building up in our memory, we are building up this bank of the sounds as we are hearing them in the language. And our ability to know those sounds, being able to bring them out of memory into the motor cortex, which is your mouth and your vocal cords, in order to be able to say those sounds. So that is why we are doing that. And the reading, if we don't have a very clear memory of the sounds, what is made, then it's difficult to read. So if you try and read the word elephant and you don't know that a PH makes the F sound, then you're going to have great difficulty with reading that word and getting any meaning behind it. And so auditory memory is really important. And it also goes, all of these things go hand in hand with a visual memory. So you need to have a visual memory of the pH and the auditory memory of the sound. They go together, and that is why phonics is so important. So we can know that children are having difficulty with this when they have difficulty with nursery rhymes, with recalling the days of the week, with numbers, and with difficulty following your verbal instructions. Difficulties with any of the dictations. So if you dictating some sentences for learners to write down, and this is a really good activity that teachers should be doing regularly, particularly if you're doing remedial work, is to dictate. So you are saying the sentence and children must write it down. So you're asking them to remember what these words are and how they're written from their memory of the words. So they're remembering how to write it. So all of these things are assisting with auditory perception. Lots of repetition is important, and lots of reciting of poems and rhymes. And anytime you're doing any manipulative skills, such as threading beads or doing little pegboards and things, there must be a verbal language component associated with it as well, so that they're following directions or saying something as they are doing it, counting as they're threading beads, for instance, counting backwards, saying the letters of the alphabet, saying words. Lots of games about using stories and visual aids and puppets around the stories. Tell a story, ask the learners to tell you the story back. Ask them to enact the story with puppets and so on. Using, for instance, mind maps with topic words on it, and saying, here's a mind map, a visual representation, and there are words about whatever the story is, animals, let's say, and asking them to speak about those key aspects on the mind map. And lots of verbal games. There's games that assist with your memory. So we can play I went shopping, and you can, this is a good game when you have a little group of kids. It works well if you've got about 4 or 5 children in the group. And the first child starts and they say, I went shopping and I bought some butter. And the next child has to say, I went shopping and I bought butter, and they add another word on. I bought butter and bread. Then the next child says, I went shopping and I bought butter and bread and red shoes. And so then the next child has to remember what all of those children had said, and they have to do it in order and remember it. So remember to play lots of these games in your sessions, or even in your classroom. And then I spy, and you can, instead of saying I spy with my little eye and looking for something, you can do an auditory game. I spy and I hear something starting with or like a telephone ringing or a car noise. You can make the noises, and then they must tell you what those noises are. Animal noises work really, really well. Playing broken telephone. So again, in a little group, you start off by giving the first person a nice long sentence, and all those ones with lots of alliterations work well, like Sally sells shells at the seashore. Those kinds of complex little alliteration rhymes. You whisper that into the first person's ear. And then that person has to whisper that exact little phrase into the child next door to them's ear. And then they all whisper it into each other's ears. And by the time you get to the last child has to say what the game was, what the words were, and often the meaning gets lost along the way and it gets broken. So playing these kinds of games are really, really good. And riddles about what is it I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about something that there's lots of different riddles you put on your feet, and you walk in this thing. What is it I'm thinking about? And then sending children to the teacher next door, or sending them home with a message to bring something or do something, but not a written message. Give it a verbal message. Say to the child, this is what I'm telling you, and ask them to repeat the message back to you so that you know that they have spoken that message. It's got a little bit of memory. And then sending them off to go and say that message to another teacher, another child, the tuck shop, whoever in the school. So ensuring that children's auditory processing and memory is being extended and being worked on all the time is what should be happening at schools. Then auditory sequential memory. So this is the ability to remember things in the correct order of what is important. And this is really crucial for following instructions. And we know that you should be giving, if learners are very young, you'll give one instruction and then they need to follow it. As they get a bit older, you can add 2 instructions and 3 instructions and 4 instructions. Open your book and turn to this page and get out your pencils and do this. But you can also make fun activities with following instructions. Jump up and down, crawl under the desk, turn the light switch on and off, pull somebody's hair next door to you. You can do all sorts of different instructions. And the trick is that you give the instructions and then they have to do them in that order that you have given the instructions. Recalling days of the week and months of the year and the alphabet, lots of drill work in order to get these sequences in place. And this is all crucial for understanding spelling and how we decode the words that are written down accurately. So in order to read, we need to understand the sequences that these sounds are presented inside words. So there are often difficulties with mixing some of these up in reading, and this has got to do with ensuring that our auditory sequential memory is functional. Okay, so we've played the game of I went shopping, having lists of words, and you say the words, and they must say those words back to you in the order or backwards, following directions, concrete directions, or treasure hunts, using Audi blocks, all sorts of games that you can play with ensuring that sequential auditory memory is developed. So anything that we are doing, remember that it's got to do with the memory. Now, another crucial auditory perception is figure ground. And figure ground relates to auditory and visual perception. It's the skill that's in both. And this is the ability to take the figure, what is the important thing, and move it out of, or highlight it out of the background that is there. So we are always hearing background noise, lots and lots of sounds in the background. Oh, my voice is gone. Lots of different sounds in the background are always interfering with the sounds. And our ability to take the crucial, to attend to the crucial words that we want them to listen to, or a pre-recording of something. We are not being, not focusing on the background distractions. And so we are filtering out all those things and focusing on the only things that we need to focus on. So you can do these activities in a noisy space. You can take children out into the playground where there's cars going by, or some kind of background music going on. You can have a little recording, something playing in the background, and make them attend to the words that you want them to listen to. So it's not always valid that you need to be working in an entirely quiet place. Children also need to learn how to focus on what is important in that particular space. And often children who have any of the attention deficit difficulties, concentration problems, they are going to find this task very, very, very difficult. And anyone who's distracted will have difficulty doing this. But it is really useful activities to go and do. So have some background noise and follow instructions. Or you can say, you can have different musical instruments playing, and when a particular sound, when they hear a particular sound, they must do a particular movement or instruction. And remember that our auditory perception also has got to do with hearing sounds close by and hearing sounds far away. So make children listen for far away sounds and make them listen for near sounds, sounds that are happening, and which is near and which is far. Auditory analysis, this is the ability to be able to break up the words into their sounds and their syllables, and it's linked to phonemic awareness. So if I give you the word cat, how can you segment this word into its separate sounds? And you would give the whole word, and you would ask the child to break it up into k, a, t. So auditory analysis has got two, sometimes we also speak about auditory manipulation. We are manipulating the sounds, we are breaking them down, we're breaking the sounds in a word down into the component sounds, and we can also do blending where we put the sounds back together. So you can give the learner the sounds, p, a, t, and they must put it together in a word. So this is crucial for reading and for spelling and writing. Lots of ways to analyze sounds. You can say, for instance, here is a word, postman. Now say the word to me again without the post. And then they must remember, so it's a memory thing, postman, no post, they must say man to you, or man, postman. Here's another example, barefoot, say the word again without foot, and they must remember it was bear. So make yourselves a whole lot of little cards with these kinds of words on them, because it's a really useful activities to have in your sessions. You can also have single words, say the word without the h. The word is heat, say it without the h. Use the sound, not the letter when you're doing that. So you wouldn't say it without the h. You would use the word h. You can do beginning of words, and you can do ends of words. So kitten, say it without the 10. Pencil, say it without the sil, and so on. You can make a whole lot of different ones. So this has all got to do with an ability to manipulate the sounds. So synthesis is putting them together, so blending it. Say k, a, p. You can have the single individual words, or you can have the rhymes. So k and ap. What word does that make? Because the rhyme at the end is the ap, as in t, ap, or in f, at, makes fat, and so on. So making lists of these words for yourselves with that children can synthesize and break down and blend. All are very important auditory manipulation things. So sounding out, you give the letters, they sound them out, they're building up the words. You can also combine it with visual clues. So you can have the cards, you can write down the word, the sounds on a card, and then you're now teaching the phonics as well as the phonemic awareness. You're doing them both together, having little Scrabble tiles with letters on them, breaking words down, building them apart, and so on. And also compound words where there is breakfast, and they need to be able to put them together and take them apart. Okay, so I've spoken quite a lot about visual and auditory discrimination. These two go hand in hand. It's the ability to accurately associate the auditory sound with the visual stimulus. And this is called correspondence, being able to know what that grapheme represents, which sound it represents, the correct decoding and encoding of the sounds. And so lots of exercises around looking at the words, looking at cards of them, playing different card games and different activities. So always be clear in your communication with learners. If you are having remedial sessions with them, try to maintain eye contact and keep your distractions at a limited, unless you're doing figure ground activities. Learners who have learning problems often have difficulties with following instructions. They often have inappropriate vocabulary, so you need to model the correct vocabulary and the correct pronunciation of words. And you can simplify instructions, paraphrase tasks so that they understand what needs to be done. Using visual clues and auditory combined is really valuable, but there'll be lots of times when you want to work on auditory things alone, and then you won't have the visual cues. Giving instructions and allowing time for them to process instructions, write down information that you say, and so on. So this concept of sensory integration, you will often hear if you're working in any schools that deal with learners who've got learning problems. And sensory integration has got to do with using the eyes and the ears and the hands, integrating the senses so that we can use them effectively to do a complex task, such as reading. Reading aloud is a complex task. Reading silently is complex. Writing, spelling, all the things we're asking children to do in school are complex tasks that require all these foundational skills to work really well. And if you really have a child who is battling with serious language difficulties, you need to work with a language or speech therapist. And if you notice that they have difficulty with their eyes and their vision and their ears, send to optometrists and audiologists to ensure that they don't need hearing aids or they don't need glasses. And you can also work closely with occupational therapists They can also help with a lot of the motor integration problems, and they are really good at devising activities for sensory integration. And then use lots and lots of different materials and apparatus and games and useful junk that you find in the house. Bottle tops are useful for writing letters on. You don't have to have fancy things. You can use old pieces of cardboard to make letters and cards from. You can cut out things from the newspaper if you're looking for pictures and so on. You don't have to spend a lot of money to make a lot of the apparatus and the things that you need in order to assist with auditory perception. So please work very closely and very carefully on auditory perception as the foundation, one of the foundational skills for ensuring that learners are able to read adequately. Okay, so thank you very much for listening there.